recently, CNN in Atlanta was dealing with some significant death threats that were lodged at them by a 19-year-old by the name of Brandon Griesemer. Now, he had called CNN on 22 different occasions, and during those phone calls, he made threats that included, "I'm coming to gun you all down," and also, "I'm smarter than you, more powerful than you, I have more guns than you, more manpower, your caste is about to get gunned down in a matter of hours." Now, CNN took those threats seriously. They immediately took action to protect its employees and make sure that everyone will be okay. But Breitbart took this story and framed it in a way that I thought was fascinating. Now, what you're about to listen to is Alex Marlow, who is the host of the radio program that Breitbart does on Patriot Radio. He's speaking to John Nolte, who's the editor-at-large at Breitbart. And here's what they had to say about the threats that CNN had to deal with. Take a listen.
But you're rightly pointing out that pushing fake news lies, as CNN does, where you push that the president is a racist and should be removed from office by the 25th Amendment because he's crazy, this is going to create a tension within the country that is going to, if not lead towards violence, it is going to at least push it in that direction. And it's a very cautionary and thoughtful piece, and yet CNN was fully triggered online, exploded over it, and I want to know if you had any thoughts on it a few days later.
You have in CNN a network that has been spreading hate, lies, fake news, openly fomenting riots for years now, ever since Jeff Zucker took over the network. And you have this 19-year-old guy in Michigan. According to authorities, he was so angry over CNN's fake news that he called them with these inexcusable death threats and threatened to go to their Atlantic headquarters and kill everyone. I don't think there's any question that the guy is unbalanced.
So let me give you some more from Nolte. He continued to say CNN is a network that is in hyperdrive to legitimize political violence. CNN wants political violence. They want people hurt. They want riots. They want Antifa out there. They see political violence as a legitimate tool to further CNN's far left agenda. So that is their take on death threats aimed at CNN, that it's CNN's fault, that they are provoking political violence. You know, for the longest time, I couldn't figure out why it was that they kept making it seem as though CNN pushes for fake news or political violence, all this BS that they keep, spewing. Why is it they keep going after CNN? CNN is the one cable news channel that goes out of its way to pretend like it doesn't have any bias, right? It doesn't have any political leanings. They're completely neutral all the time. They don't want to pick sides. I mean, yes, they have some of the hosts that do some commentary that, will call Trump out. But overall, they always make it seem as though both sides are equal. I mean, MSNBC doesn't do that. MSNBC comes at it from a very anti-Trump perspective, but they don't attack Trump. I mean, they don't attack MSNBC as much. And I realize what it is. They know that CNN is obsessed with appearing neutral, and that they won't fight back as aggressively as some other cable news channel will. But by the way, who pushes for political violence more than anyone? Wouldn't it be the president who's consistently saying, fake news, oh, they're doing all this bad stuff to the American people, they're misinforming you? Would it be that guy? Would it be the guy that tweeted this last year?
Oh my God, what's gonna happen?
No, but it's CNN. It's CNN that's provoking political violence. I'm so tired of the right wing deciding what the narrative is, successfully framing things and twisting things to their advantage, lying to people about what's really going on. The reality is the conservatives right now, people like the talking heads at Breitbart that you just heard from, they're the ones pushing for political violence. Our president, he's pushing for political violence. They're the ones who support it, who push for it, who frame things in these ways. How are you gonna blame how are you gonna blame CNN for a 19-year-old directing death threats toward them? Like, how sick is that?
No, well, that's exactly the point. What they're trying to do is tell their audience, CNN has it coming.
It's disgusting.
The guy who threatened to kill everybody at CNN, well, that was CNN's fault.
No.
If CNN hadn't done the fake news, well, then they wouldn't have to get murdered. But I guess since they're doing it, they're asking for it. That is clearly what John Nolte and Alex Marlow are driving at here. I mean, look, there's a lot of different ways to look at this, but to me, one of the most frustrating parts is the rest of the media taking Breitbart or any of these alt-right lunatics seriously. Oh, that's a source. Oh, that's legitimate. Oh, they reported on this, as if they have an interest in the truth. Look at these lunatics that think that CNN is fomenting violence. What? On which planet? Look, I have my issues with CNN. Ironically, it's the opposite. It's that, not that they're not promoting violence, I don't want them to do that under any circumstance, that they're the establishment. They have an establishment bias. And you know what an establishment bias is? Protect the status quo. Now, the last thing the status quo wants is any violence in the streets. They're already part of a multi-billion-dollar corporation. They don't want anybody to rock the boat. It's their boat. So, and everyone on the CNN is plain Jane vanilla. And they take these guys and pretend that they're the ones pushing for riots in the streets. You have to be a lunatic to believe that. And the rest of the press takes these lunatics seriously?
Yeah, it was CNN that pushed for the protests in Charlottesville, Virginia, right? It was CNN that persuaded someone to run over a counter protester and essentially take her life. It was CNN that did that, or was it Breitbart and right-wing, non-news organizations like that essentially foster this type of disgusting environment? And by the way, look, politics aside, we're playing with people's lives right now. They're playing with people's lives, and they have absolutely no qualms about it.
And by the way, why drop Jeff Zucker's name in the middle of all that? There's no evidence that CNN changed their so-called fomenting of violence. What an again, I can't describe to you how insane that is. And to link that to Jeff Zucker. And then they protest like, oh, how dare they link us to the neo-Nazis? Well, we know that Milo asked neo-Nazis for their opinion on what the alt-right should be, and then you guys at Breitbart published it. We already know that. And then you drop Jeff Zucker's name in the middle of a rant about how they have it coming. Gee, I wonder where you're going with that. Okay, so that if you're not aware and you're not an alt-right freak, you're totally confused. I don't know why. Why Jeff Zucker? Jeff Zucker happens to be Jewish. It's a whistle dog to their followers. Oh, it's the elite that are doing it again. Remember when Alex Jones was ranting about Brian Stelter and how he's a spawn of Satan and how they drink the kids' blood and they run all the banks. Why does CNN run the banks? It's obvious anti-Semitism put in there to foment people. And then he says at one point, quote, obviously, John Nolte does, obviously he was provoked by CNN's fake news. In other words, if you don't like CNN's fake news, just like we've been telling you not to like it, I guess you'd be provoked too into trying to kill all of them.
And also think about how this is a form of intimidation, right? It's a form of intimidation. If you ever have the audacity to criticize Trump, well then immediately you will be labeled as fake news. And we're gonna go ahead and constantly perpetuate this like ridiculous narrative that you're fake news to the point where people get all up in arms and then direct death threats to you, direct violence toward you. And then if anyone carries out any type of threat or violence, it's your fault. It's your fault for having the audacity to speak out against our dear leader. That's what this is. It's creating an environment of intimidation so people don't actually speak the truth about Donald Trump, so they don't actually criticize him for his ridiculous failed policies. It's disgusting.
Look, it's one thing for right-wingers to say that CNN has a liberal bias, and that's perfectly fine. Agree, disagree. And CNN, I'm sure, wholly disagrees with my assessment that they have an establishment bias. Those are conversations to be had in the political sphere. When you start doing exactly as Anna pointed out, intimidation, winking at violence, and this is the beginning of fascist propaganda. You cannot legitimize it. Because once you take the Breitbarts of the world and any of those alt-right online so-called news publications, they're not news, they're propaganda, and they're hateful and oftentimes dangerous propaganda. If you legitimize them, you have done them a great favor and a great disservice to journalism. They're not journalists, they're nowhere near it. All they want to do is stoke up their side for dangerous propaganda. If you want to get the whole Young Turks show every single day, become a member, tytnetwork.com/join. And once you do, you'll be saying,
you know, I'm like a smart person.
Or you might say,
I think it's weird.
Or you might say,
oops. No, that won't be that one. It won't be that one. It'll be great, trust me. TYTnetwork.com/join.